Guys, welcome back to Strong Successful Male. So for today, I'm going to go over an article which is hands down the craziest story I've ever heard with regards to a husband, getting even with a cheating wife. Okay? This takes the cake. Hands down, this is the craziest. Okay? And this situation basically is marriage isn't going too well. The husband's trying to do what he can to make things better. But lo and behold, the wife's cheating and he finds out about it, and he goes down this path to get even with her. Like I said, takes it to a whole new level. Even to the point where I think he's gone way too far. And you're going to see what I'm talking about as I progress through the story of where he's gone way too far. And before any of you guys start thinking, oh, SSM is getting soft, no, just listen to the story. You'll see what I'm talking about, because this guy does take it too far. But it is definitely very entertaining along the way to see some of the things he does. And so for any of you guys that have been cheated on, you'll definitely find this amusing. So the title of the article is Husband Catches Cheating Wife in the Act, Then Crafts a Revenge Plan So Genius It's Almost Cruel. Starts off saying, every relationship has their hiccups. Mistakes will be made. They could be big or small, but hopefully we can just get past them. That's not always the case, though. A few years ago, a man went through quite the family drama. He, we'll call him Jake, shared his story on Reddit. Jake thought he and his wife were the perfect couple. They lived out in the suburbs, they were financially secure, nice and healthy, had great chemistry, with two amazing kids who were 9 and 14 years old. The two had a good social life, and Jake generally thought they were a happy couple. So far, so good. That was until they started going through some rough patches in their marriage. But they were the perfect couple, and this was just some typical married people problems. So they'd get through it, right? That's exactly what Jake was thinking, until he eventually caught on to something seemed a bit strange. His wife was spending a little more time than usual texting her girlfriends. That phone is the secret to everything, guys. At first, Jake didn't think much of it. He thought they were stronger than the small bickering, but even so, he started making an effort to be better. He did everything he could to improve their relationship status by getting out of work when he could, helping around the house, being more emotionally available, and much more. But nothing seemed to work for him. Jake thought he was taking the right steps, but he realized the gulf between them just kept getting wider and wider. And there was seemingly nothing he could do about it. See, the guy's really trying, he's making every effort, but we're going to see what's really going on behind the scenes with the missus. Then one day, while Jake was recharging an old iPad for his son to use, he stumbled across something not meant for his eyes. The iPad was still logged into his wife's Facebook account, and the Messenger app was blowing up. He looked into it and thought some of the messages were highly questionable. The messages were between her and a guy from her hometown who Jake fondly refers to as Jim Bob Cooter, or JBC for short. Jake analyzed the messages between his wife and JBC, and although some messages had clearly been deleted, he figured that even though the messages weren't completely innocent, they weren't enough to get too worked up about. Jake made a mental note to keep an eye on it, but overall focus on his marriage and fixing what was broken. Well, right then and there, he should have called her on it, but the guy, he obviously is trying really hard and wants to believe the best in her, as many guys do, and then they learn the hard way. The next day, Jake was doing all he could to find new ways to make his wife happy by doing some projects around the house and writing her sweet love notes to remind her how much he appreciated her and respected her. All the while, instead of being impressed with Jake's efforts, she was just sitting in the living room, texting her girlfriends. Being naturally curious, Jake took his son's iPad into his office to take a peek at what he'd seen earlier the week. He opened up the Facebook Messenger app, and sure enough, he started seeing some suspicious activity. Jake watched in real time as his wife betrayed him in multiple ways. She and this man, he didn't even know, talked about Jake as if he was the scum of the earth. They were making fun of him, pointing out his flaws. His wife was even exploiting his insecurities and his deepest secrets that were told in total confidentiality to this mystery man. Not cool. She continued digging even deeper, and just when he thought he couldn't get any worse, they started incorporating a provocative undertone to their messages. It got even worse when his wife and JBC started talking about Jake's bedroom performance, and they were definitely not the kindest of reviews. This was devastating for Jake to read, to say the least, but Jake had to think of a plan, something to help his situation. He couldn't do much, so he started taking some screenshots here and there. He couldn't get the entire conversation because his wife was deleting them as soon as she sent them. She's a sneaky one. Now again, this guy, to review, things aren't going well. He's trying really hard to make things better, be a good guy, but meanwhile, she's doing all this bullshit behind his back. Sound familiar, anyone? Jake knew he couldn't confront his wife, not yet. The wound was fresh, and it was too much to handle. So he stayed in a separate room until his wife fell asleep, had a couple of drinks, and started thinking of a plan. Jake decided to take work off the next day. He spent it doing some soul-searching, drinking, and figuring out what his next move should be. When his wife came home, she started asking what was wrong and if everything was okay. Jake simply said he was having a bad day, and she left it at that. Unconcerned with her husband, she went straight to her phone and started talking to JBC again. As it happened, Jake recalled, "I began a couple solid weeks of taking screenshots, drinking, and detaching myself from the relationship. I knew there was no going back from this. The messages were now overtly flirtatious with my wife, completely into it, and JBC sprinkling in I love yous." That was it for Jake. No more waiting around for a plan. He had to start taking some action. He contacted his lawyer and decided to start making moves with the issue. That's where things started to get surreal for Jake. As Jake watched the messages, he found out that JBC was coming in town with the intentions of spending some quality time with Jake's wife. Well, you could see that coming. They had a beautifully elaborate plan. They were going to stay at a nice hotel and have a wonderful weekend filled with infidelity. Through the messenger, he was able to figure out just exactly where and when his wife and this man would be meeting up. The very next day, Jake's wife started telling him about her plans for the weekend, except she was saying she needed a spa weekend with the girls. She said she needed to relax and have some time to herself. Jake went along with it. He said it was a great idea and that she deserved this time. They agreed that after her spa weekend, they would work on their marriage. Yeah, after she got some dick for 2 days straight. Knowing that this was all a bunch of bull, Jake agreed with it and said he'd do whatever was necessary to get their marriage back on track. Jake's wife was clueless to his awareness and was happy as can be, thinking she had just about pulled it off. Little did she know, right after their talk, Jake went off to meet the lawyers. He spoke with the lawyers to draft the perfect separation agreement. It said she'd move out, only get weekend visitation, and no child support in the interim until the divorce was finalized. After meeting with the lawyers, all of his feelings towards his wife had vanished. He was officially over the emotions of betrayal. Instead, he saw just red. His anger grew into something he'd never felt before. The weeks leading up to his wife's weekend getaway were a blur of seething anger. But he tried to keep it cool to prepare for what was coming next. And this is where it gets really interesting, guys. The day finally arrived. Jake decided not to go to work so he could focus on what was at hand. He withdrew half of the money from all the joint accounts. He left her half alone and redirected his paycheck to a new bank. He closed their money market account and got a cashier's check for half of hers, and deposited his into his new account. He stopped by a printing shop and printed off around 75 pages of Facebook Messenger chats. He ran around finalizing the details, avoiding being at home where she was. Eventually, she left. She told him she loves him, and he told her to enjoy the weekend and to have some fun. Jake waited around. By 8:30 p.m., he decided it was time to go to the hotel and confront the issue head on. He got to the hotel and called his wife's phone from the lobby. It went straight to voicemail. Jake's mind started racing. He thought she and JBC were already getting it on. He tried to forget all of that. He tried to forget all of that as he went up to the front desk and asked to use the phone and for it to be connected to JBC's room. After it rings 3 times, JBC finally picked up. JBC answers the phone and says, "Hello, Jake. JBC, can you send my wife down to the lobby, please?" JBC, "I don't know what you're talking about, bro." Jake, "Okay then, I guess I'll have to call Mrs. JBC and get her down." Obviously a total bluff, total bluff. I knew he was married and I knew her first name, but that was it. JBC, inaudible, shuffling panic. Jake, you got 5 minutes. Click. Imagine that little scene in the bedroom in the hotel when he called him up. After this call, his wife came down the elevator, confused and concerned about what's awaiting her. Jake sat her down in the corner of the lobby and his wife started trying to make excuses. Of course. He wanted nothing to do with that. He started explaining how things were going to be. He said, "I'm not here to argue. The things that are said in this pile of papers are what's going on. The only way I'm not giving a copy of this to our daughter, your parents, and emailing it to everyone we know is if you move out immediately." Good for Jake. His wife was very prideful. Their daughter was going through a rebellious teen phase, and if she knew what her mom did, it would forever kill their relationship. His wife was also her parents' golden child, and she always worried about what they thought of her, and her professional life depended completely on her reputation. Jake knew the only leverage he had was to pull this shame card, so that's exactly what he did. She started crying and saying things that made no sense. Jake kept on going. Yeah, first there's the denial, then there's all the crying and drama, and then there's usually the part when they spin it around and try to blame you for her cheating. Does this sound familiar, guys? He gave her a check for half of the money in their account, told her he already split up everything for them, and explained that she would have enough money to get her own place away from him and the kids. She started crying even more, but Jake wasn't having any of it. He gave her the separation agreement, and he stated that it was more than fair considering her infidelity. I wonder where this guy lives, because depending on the state, that could, things could be a little different depending on where they live. Doesn't say in the article. He demanded that she sign it over and move out of the house as soon as her weekend was over. Before she could argue, he brought up the screenshots again so he could play the guilt card one more time. He left it at that. He simply told her to enjoy the weekend and walked out, and heard her break down in the background. Jake made it out the door and into his car before he had a breakdown of his own. I can understand that. Throughout the weekend, she kept trying to call him, asked him to talk, but he wanted nothing to do with her. Eventually, the weekend ended. She signed the agreement and started moving out of the house. She explained to the kids that mom and dad just needed some time apart and that he still loved them, and all other aspects of a standard divorce talk. After about a week, she wanted to have a real talk. Jake had figured out what he wanted and agreed to speak with her. Except Jake had some ulterior motives to this meeting that his wife didn't know about in the slightest. She said she was very sorry, she wanted another chance to be with Jake and her family, and how she'd do anything. Notice it was Jake who was doing anything and everything to make it better. Meanwhile, she's having this online emotional affair, and then she went out to meet this dude for a weekend. And we all know what it kept going on forever. It wouldn't have just stopped. Jake had zero intentions of ever taking her back, but he decided this is where his revenge would come into play. He said she should set up a marriage counseling that worked with his schedule. Jake explained he couldn't live with her, but she should be around to keep the relationship going with the kids. So she came by to the house to cook and clean and took care of the kids and normal house chores. Yeah, make her come over to the house and clean. It's the least you can do. But then would go back to her place at the end of the day. He was completely using her in her vulnerable state. They continued to go to therapy, but Jake was determined to stay the victim, and he intentionally blamed all her problems on her. He wasn't even going to give her a chance. All he wanted was to kill time, to establish himself as the primary caregiver to the kids, and he made sure she didn't have residency in the house. After 6 months of couples therapy, personal therapy, and many conversations, Jake finally broke it to her that for once and for all, he needed a divorce. Now, I'm guessing he did the 6 months of therapy only to position himself in a good place. Otherwise, I would never sit there and do 6 months of therapy knowing darn well I'm going to never, ever give her the time of day again. I'm not sure which it was. I'm guessing that he was doing to get a better position. Who the hell knows? But if it was simply just for revenge, I would never sit on a couch for 6 months in a shrink's office with my ex. That's just a waste of time. Goes on to say, but to keep her still a bit interested, he said she was still the love of his life and that someday he might give it another try. She was heartbroken, but agreed, thinking that they still had a chance in the future. But that was enough for Jake. He needed the kids to be on his side as well, and he had quite the plan to ensure that would happen. Now, this is the part where, in my opinion, he takes his shit too far. Because this is when he starts manipulating the kids. And that's not cool. Because this is the usual bullshit that a spiteful, vindictive wife during divorce does to a husband, trying to turn the kids against him. That's not cool, and this is exactly what he does to her. Some of you may think, hey, she deserves it, but in my opinion, I don't think that's cool, especially also like if this has happened to any of you guys where your ex tries to turn the kids against you, or if you were a kid where, guess what, your mom tried to do the same thing against your dad. I disagree with it, but I'm going to read the story anyway. It says, Jake started leaving his computer open with a Google search with articles uptitled, How to Survive Your Wife's Infidelity. He even began to print some out and leave them on the kitchen counter, only slightly hidden in a fairly obvious attempt for the kids to see it. Eventually his daughter found out, was clearly distraught, and came crying to her father. Jake told her she wasn't supposed to see that, explained that her mother made a mistake, and even though all this had happened, he'd still be there for her. He was playing the nice dad card so that she would choose her dad's side over her mom's. Jake's daughter couldn't look at her mother the same way ever again. She would scream anytime they talked and end up despising her mother. This is between him and the wife. You should not drag the kids in it. It's not fucking cool. Eventually his son felt the same way, and when the court date came around, the kids said they wanted to stay with their father. Things were going exactly how Jake planned. Eventually the divorce was finalized. Jake got the house, the kids, and generous child support since he switched to part-time during the experience. For 2 years now, Jake has been able to live with his house, with his kids, work part-time, have his ex subsidize his income, and whenever she has the kids for the weekend, he has some women come over for some pleasurable evenings. I'm cool with all that except for the kids part. To his kids, he's a perfect dad who was kind and always took the high road. To his ex-wife, he was the one that got away. She even tries to get back with him every once in a while, and he pretends to indulge that request just so she'll come over for an evening every once in a while for a little nookie. Oh, so the missus, I didn't see this part here. So his ex comes over and he bangs her and then kicks her to the curb. Yeah, this guy's hell-bent on revenge. But Jake knows they will never reconcile. Jake figured out how to get exactly what he wanted out of a terrible situation by manipulating his wife, his kids, and anyone else along the way. She did hurt him and betray his trust, but were his actions truly justified? This is coming from the person writing the article. We're not so sure if he deserved that nice guy reputation after knowing the true intents behind his actions. What do you think? Was he in the right for reacting how he did? Should he have given her another chance at the very least? Left the kids out of it? Let us know what you think in the comments below. Again, this is coming from the article. So, I don't blame this guy in the least for being pissed. I don't blame him in the least for all the actions he did to print out all those things and stick it to her at the hotel, kick her to the curb. I got no problem with that. I also have no problem with, hey, he went back to working part-time so he could get some alimony payments from her. No problem there. I got the problem with manipulating the kids. Not cool. And yes, it's great to living with him. And even though the mother, his wife, fucked up, and that was definitely not cool what she did to him, maybe she was, a good mom. You could argue saying, well, she wasn't a good mom cheating on the dad. Who the hell knows? But the bottom line is this: manipulating the kids is not cool. That's the kind of crap that angry wives do to their husbands while they're in divorce. So I'm against that. Anything else? Yeah, I don't blame the guy. So, but I thought this was a very interesting story to tell, guys. It's definitely the craziest story I've ever heard thus far. So, but all right, guys, that's it for today. Be sure to comment down below. Let me know what you think about this. Did you go too far with the kids? Let me know about your experiences. Have any of you guys ever had ex-wives pull this kind of bullshit on you? I mean, in terms of trying to turn the kids against you. And just these are things that you guys got to know about. You know, for those of you guys that are in marriages, be aware these things happen. You try to fix things, and next thing you know, the wife's having an affair and all that, even though you're trying really hard, and how this guy went about it. And be sure to like the video, share with your friends, and subscribe. And I'll catch you next time.